That is 190 students sign up for this class, for this EP class.
Okay.
Trustee Prasad and Trustee Zhang, I'm going to not step away from my camera, but turn it off for a moment. I'm getting messages that we're not live streaming. I'm going to try and problem solve that.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sounds good.
If you can still hear me, CJ, Luis Zamora just joined the meeting. Yeah, Luis.
Okay.
Yeah, Luis. Luis, can you give us an indication that you are now live streaming, please?
He says we are live.
It says we are live.
Okay.
Okay.
So my apologies. We were on the statistics adoption.
So this seems like another standard type expense for about 200 books. So any question on this? No?
Well, anyone can do a simple math. If it's 100, well, do we buy more books than for 190 students? Because if you divide it by, what is that, do I come with the number of the price per book, or this covers more? Anyone do something since?
Well, usually there's a classroom copy and a student copy, right?
Is that right? I don't know. Can anyone clarify?
We would probably, I would probably ask you guys to probably submit that in writing and we can get an answer to you, because the folks from instructional services who provided that option on the agenda are not available.
Oh, but I was wondering, yeah, what is the general practice? Because this comes down, if we have 190 students, it comes down to, if we buy one book per student, it's $252. So.
I do know that the books are very expensive, but
Okay. Okay, $252. Good to know, right? And are we buy 2 books for each student? You know, 1 copy in the classroom or 1 copy for the student? I thought you buy just for the students, not extra copy. But okay, we take it off.
Yeah,
right?
we can submit this in writing.
thank you.
Then the next item is payroll warrants. This is standard. I don't know if we need to discuss this one. So we can go to purchase orders, unless Trustee Zhang or Zhang, you have any question on the payroll warrants.
Which item? Purchase orders?
11, well, so 11.1, any question? Otherwise we go to
11.1. No, I don't. Those are pretty standard.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is
every single
11.1.
month we would get that.
Yes. Now the purchase orders, I just want to ask Mr. Battle or Rice, is there anything special here, or are these all routine as well?
I can probably speak on that one. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the standard ones also. Per board policy, we have to put it in as part of our regular agenda or consent item in regards to purchases that we have that we're planning to have.
Okay, so there's no extraordinary item here.
None, sir.
Okay, sounds good. The next one, 11.3, has no budget implication. Then 11.4. So this one seems like it's just the money for the next phase. Is this a planned amount? Maybe Kelly can answer that. The $48,000.
Kelly, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. My sound was kind of in and out. So I didn't fully hear the question. Can you repeat it?
So this is item 11.4.
Yes.
So you're trying to get board approval for that 48,000. This, I'm assuming
the
this is planned amount.
Yes, the $48,114 is for this particular phase of work for this particular vendor. And so it's just the continuation of their contract for this phase of work that we're in now.
Okay, sounds good.
But I do have a question.
Yes.
Usually when I got this statement, there is a one-page PDF. And so you look at the two columns. The first one is, I think, is the budget. The second one is, I think, finished number. But they always look the same most time. I'm wondering whether we can, every single time we have a meeting on, let's see, this project, and we attach the previous any change. So we kind of gradually, we would stack them at different, several pages of accumulate several pages of PDF, and then we know the history of what has been done.
So Trustee Zhang, if you look at that document that you're referencing, at the very bottom of the spreadsheet, it gives you a detailed listing of every item that has been deducted from that budget for that particular project. So, but if there's a specific format that you'd like for me to report it in, I'd be happy to, change it to that. But the changes every month that we attach it, or every transaction for a particular project, you usually can see and follow on that page PDF at the very bottom, a detailed description with the dollar amount for every item at the bottom. But I can, as I said, I can change it to whatever format works for you, that we can track it differently if that's what you'd like.
What I'm saying is, let's see for this product. I would like to see the beginning date. Like when do we, when you see this project, there is no beginning date, or maybe what is our targeted finish date? At least we have a reference. Now we know that this product is already started.
I see.
And so I do know that when you give description, there is this highlighted thing. You can click on it, and then you can see when we have discussed it, previously. But it's very, you see what I mean? It's not easy to read. I have to print it out and compare.
Okay.
Anyone has the same issue?
I was going to ask you, is it possible for us to have another conversation where maybe
Yes, absolutely,
and
absolutely.
you can kind of
This is
draw
just
visually what you're thinking of, and then I can give you what you're asking for, so that I don't keep frustrating or confusing you guys. So I'd be happy to have a more in-depth conversation with you about how to format this so that you better understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can take it offline.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Sounds good. Then the next. Then the next set of the certificated actions, there are no budget implications to those, right? So now the approving the athletic coaches, so we are filling some of the vacancies, right? So was this all fully budgeted, and there's no budget impact? Okay, that's good.
Correct. These would be things that are in our annual budget year over year.
Okay.
Seiji, is this under which category? I know some is under what's called staff. It's a general fund.
In most cases, I'd have to defer to Rais and Marcus, but in most cases, staffing is paid out of the general fund unless it is specific to something like special education services or another restricted category.
CJ, that's correct. They are paid from general fund.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And then the MOU between FUSD and FATA. Now there's no budget implication here, but I was getting some community asks about wrestling. Now that's an indoor sport, right? So are we getting ready to enable that as well, or?
I would have to go back and check the guidelines, but I believe that wrestling is something that is permitted once we hit the yellow tier, but I will see if I can pull that up very quickly. So I can answer that question in a moment.
Okay, but that email claims that from a state perspective, red is what is required. So maybe we are more stringent than that. Yeah, while you look it up, we can continue on.
Wrestling has a close contact, right? You're like in each other's face.
Yes, yes.
Our most updated guidance, at least for our district, has been the yellow tier for wrestling.
Okay, so I'll send a separate email, CJ, to get to understand if that is a FUSC requirement or that's more of a county or state requirement.
Okay.
So I can respond to the community member. Okay, then let's the future return to in-person instruction. This is not a budget item. So was there anything from public comment about this item? Rice?
Yes, Victoria sent the email, and it does have some questions about that. AB 86 and some questions related to that. So CJ, do you want me to read those questions, or you have them?
Give me 1 second. I was just looking for the wrestling. I will pull up those questions momentarily. And for the benefit of anybody who may be watching, I'll read the question specific to returning to in-person instruction, and then we'll provide a response. The first is funding for AB 86 reduces 1% each school day that the district does not offer in-person instruction after April 1st. Based on our school calendar, we do not have any instructional days scheduled from April 2nd through the 11th. Does that mean if we open in person April 12th, we would capture 99% of the funds, and April 19th, 94% of the funds? How is funding allocated if high school begins later than elementary schools? So in terms of AB 86, there is a funding that is provided to school districts if they open up by April 1st. That funding is reduced by 1% each day that a district is not open, but the bill specifies that those are instructional days. So for example, if we have our spring break, those days do not count towards a 1% reduction. And the requirement for qualifying for those funds is that the school district is serving specific populations of students if we are in the red tier. And that is most likely where we will be, since we anticipate Alameda County moving into the red tier. Our current case rates are at about 6 per 100,000. And in order to qualify, we need to be serving specific populations of students identified in the bill. We need to have our TK through 6th grade if they're in elementary grades open, and at least one secondary grade has to be returned for in-person instruction. So if high school opened up later than elementary, it would have an implication, but high school alone is not the secondary level. So it would depend on when we returned our students for either middle school or high school. The second question was based on the timeline for district proposed reopening. Educators will be back setting up their classrooms in person in 2 weeks. Given that there was production technology equipment proposed and bargaining for rolling camera carts for simultaneous teaching, what is the expense of that? When is it getting approved by the board? And when would it be expected to arrive at the site classrooms for setup? I didn't see any of this for action item approval at the school board meeting. So I appreciate the question. I'm not aware that there's been a proposal for rolling camera carts. We do have webcams on hand that we think can be beneficial in this process, but I don't believe there's been any proposal for rolling camera carts. Number 3, given the safe in-person cohort size and the offering of school 2 days a week in person each, this caps teachers with students at 24. This means for every 4 classes of 30 who choose in person, this requires 5 teachers in person to serve those 120 students. What is the current proposed budget for this implementation? And what is the district's plan for securing these additional teachers in the next 2 weeks? Again, I appreciate the question. That is something that I don't believe has been part of what's been proposed. I think what's been proposed is a hybrid model, and I'll leave further discussion on that to our collective bargaining teams to work out. But much like has been identified at the elementary level, we will have to adjust the number of cohorts and the size of cohorts once we know the number of students who are interested in returning to on-campus instruction. So once we know that number, we certainly may need to adjust. And the question that's presented before us this evening, it references kind of 2 cohorts. And we certainly understand with secondary schools, we may need 3 cohorts. If we have a lot of student interest in returning, we may need 4 cohorts. So we'll have to wait and see what that student interest is and how we respond accordingly with the schedule and with staffing. And that's certainly something that will need to be worked out through collective bargaining. And that covers the questions for return to in-person instruction for that agenda item.
Okay. Thanks, CJ. So then let's move on to the next one, which is the main thing here, the second interim budget report. So let's go through the public questions, and then we can go through our questions.
Wait, real quick, I had a quick question on 15.1 as well, on the funding ingredient.
Okay.
So on slide 9 of the presentation on board docs, it shows the FUC funding implications, which I assume means like of the $2 billion what we actually receive. So there's a 10,271,000 and also a 21,665,000. So are those 2 separate grants, which would be a total of about 30 million, or is the total 21 million?
Those are 2 separate funding sources. And well, I shouldn't say funding sources, but those are 2 separate amounts. We anticipate that they're going to come to us close to this number. These are estimates only. And these are estimates based on the information that is known from the bill that was passed. And we have companies like School Services who take our LCFF calculations and our student population numbers and run them through the formula that give us a projection of how much Fremont Unified School District would receive under these plans. So the in-person instruction grant is the one that is connected to the April 1st timeline for reopening. The 21 million is connected to the expanded learning opportunity grants. So those are 2 separate amounts and estimate amounts only, but we would take them both in total, taking us just over 30 million.
All right, thank you.
Okay, then let's go to 15.2 and let's go through public questions first.
All right, so I'm going to read the first question number 1 from the email. So I would have to toggle between 2 screens. I won't be able to see you because I'm going to be looking at the other screen. I apologize for that. The question number 1 is, in below September presentation, the enrollment calculations are 34,895 with ADA projection of 34,745 and percentage of 99.57%. On page 12, lower numbers are 34,782 and 96.89% for ADA of 33,699 are still listed. Has revenue projections for our improved ADA been updated despite this? Approximately how much more will FUSD receive for this increase beyond what we budgeted for at that time of our approved 2021 budget in summer? Then it points to the presentation that we made in September. To answer that, for 2021 fiscal year, we are going with hold harmless clause in the legislation in the Education Act. So we are using 1920 ADA for our enrollment, for our LCFF projections. So even if we have slightly more or less ADA this year, based on our enrollment, that is immaterial because we are going to rely on previous year's ADA. That is going to change with COLA, which is cost of living factor. Otherwise, it's going to be based on last year's ADA. I'm going to move on to question number 2. Accounting for the 0.56% cost of living for certificated educators on page 18, it appears based on the expenditures from last year, the spending would come in 198,874,295, assuming static FTE when actually the number of positions has decreased. Please explain the projections for 3 million additional. For this, since there are numbers in this question, I have to compare the numbers. So I will do some research on that and I can provide the response later on because I am not able to, between the time when I received this email and this meeting, I was not able to make any comparison or do the research. So if that's okay with Board of Education and CG and Marcus, I can provide the response later on.
Now, what page is referenced for that $3 million?
So I think the way I understand is Victoria is asking that as compared to last year's total expenditures, if we put 0.56% on top of that, there should be one number, but it seems like our enrollment, our expenses more by about $3 million.
Okay.
So why that discrepancy is there?
No, but
So for that, I have to do some research.
Is she referring to a particular page in the book?
Page 18.
Page 18. Okay. Okay, sounds good.
And then question number 3. When we have discussed books and supplies previously, it was described that this was a holding line item for additional revenues that may come in. That would show an expenditure in the books and supplies until it was properly sorted for the actual expense. On page 18, we can still see that we are projected to spend $27,256,799 in books and supplies as compared to $9,818,175 we spent last year. Please explain this increase or when we would expect to see transparency on how this money is being spent through the line items on which they belong. So this is our continuous process going on right now. As we are spending money in other categories, especially the COVID-related funding that we received, which is learning loss mitigation funds and CARES Act funds, we are moving between other categories. So that is still going on. When we are going to have our estimated actuals, which is in about 1 or 2 months, we're going to show the actual transfer of funds between these categories, and that will become more transparent at that time. Even as we speak, we are making transfers between expenditure categories. Money is moving from books and supplies lines to other lines based on our needs. As an example, recently we bought some air purifiers for each classroom. So the money had to shift between expenditure categories to pay for that expense because we were planning to spend money in one way, but because of this expense, we had to move expenses or the budgets to other categories. So that is one thing that we have to do, and we are going to provide details of that. Question number 4.
So as of today, Rice, we have $27 million. Is that the, so I'm looking at page 18 for books and supplies.
Let me see. She is referring to page number 18, I think.
Yeah, so I'm looking at that and books and supplies. I see that the amount in the second interim budget is $27 million.
Yes.
So is this
And that is because of the learning loss mitigation funds that we have.
okay? So at the end of the year, will this thing continue to be here, or you said some will move as we spend like the money on air purifiers and things like that?
So some money is going to definitely move. And the reason for that is that if we go back to our budget adoption back in July, we had a $35 million budget deficit at the time. So
Right.
when we received these funds, our goal was to use most of this money for salaries and benefits.
Mhm.
So our goal is to move money from this category to pay for salaries and benefits and spend all of that money by June 30th. So there should not be any money left for learning loss mitigation and CARES Act money in our budgets.
Sure.
All money should be spent down and properly accounted for.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Then the question number 4 is, we know that unspent funds means students unserved. On page 19, we have noted additional funds received for DL/PPE and learning loss mitigation. Please explain in its placement on this page for funding for ending fund balance projections. Should we understand that this means that we won't be able to spend this year, but we will plan for next year? So she is again referring to page number 19, and we have designations on page number 19.
So which line of page number 19?
So she is looking at page 19 and second to last column.
Yes.
I take it back. Last column, which says
Mhm.
second interim budget. Almost in the middle of the page, there's a $4 million and $2,634,107.
So this money is supposed to be spent by June 30th, right?
This money, no, this money actually is unrestricted money that can be spent for DL and PPE. Or if we don't need it this year, definitely we are going to spend that for next year if we have additional PPE and learning loss mitigation needs.
Yeah, so the
And Marcus,
expectation is that this year, if we get, I don't know, whatever percentage of students coming back, next year it'll be much higher. And we'll need the funds to procure all the PPE and the safety related expenses that would be necessary at that time.
Yes, and in the current year budget, actually, we already have many budget items already listed for PPE and distance learning. We have paid for them, or we are planning to pay for them, so they are already have a purchase order issued against them. But if we need any additional supplies, the money is going to be used for that purpose this year or next year.
Sure.
That's the whole purpose of this section, which is designations. When we plug in money in designations, our goal is to set this money aside and show that separately, so we can account for that money and public can see that money setting aside, so we can use this money from this area and move that to other budget areas.
So with CJ, what we discussed in another meeting that there would for this distance learning in person type model that has been proposed. So any equipment for that, we don't have much time to acquire this year perhaps, right? But we can augment classrooms with these funds for the 21-22 school year.
Yes, I believe we could use these funds, and we could also likely use the funds that we may still be receiving from the state as part of Assembly Bill 86 as well. So I think there's a few different funding options for us to do that for the coming school year.
Okay.
One question that, let's say if we open summer school, and that would be still belong to this current school year, 2021. If we're gonna, open summer school or learning loss. So that money will belong to this budget. I mean, 20 to 21, right?
Yes. So summer school overlaps 2 fiscal periods because it has about 5 or 6 days this fiscal year and then about 15, 16 days next fiscal year because we close our fiscal year on June 30th. So it has
Okay.
that overlap between 2 time periods. When we buy any kinds of supplies or any materials, that actually belongs to both fiscal years, this year and next fiscal year, because students are going to use our supplies both years. But since we have a clear cutoff date of June 30th, we usually buy supplies this year to pay for activities that happen next year.
Okay. All right. Um, um, I have a question about I see that I think the where's I see the SR program, and you see on the same page 19, and it's still listed as 885. Aren't we just going to reduce it to 400 something because it's half of the thing as we agreed upon?
So the board, yes. So the Board of Education approved to cut that in half starting from next year because reductions or budget balancing solutions that we approved, they for 21-22 fiscal year. And this is just a placement of those funds that we have taken money out of the budget, which was $885,000, and we are putting that in designations just to show the public that the SRO programs was reduced from the budget and the money is sitting here pending Board of Education discussion and decision to use this money some other way.
Oh, okay, I got it. Is the ending fund balance? All right.
Yes,
Is that
this
right?
is in
Okay. Right, thank you. Oh, designated. Okay, got it. Ah, I think I need to talk to you separately. I never
Sure.
would get enough of all this data jumping from one page to another.
One-on-one meetings always help. We had some one-on-one meetings before, but yeah, they always help. So we are always here to sit down with you and explain things.
I think I would actually fall in love with those numbers. So this is the second book I got. Love
Yeah,
that.
and we need to memorize it, and then there'll be a quiz on it, right? Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Are there other questions?
There are no more questions in the email. I just read 4 questions and responded. I do need to do some research on some of them and get back to you on them.
Okay. So from my side, it seems like on page, well, actually the summary that you have on the agenda, it seems like with this second interim, our reserve percentage goes up to 3.77. So that now, does this include all of the amounts that we just saw? I mean, or are those designated so that's not part of this reserve?
Yeah, the designated are not part of the reserve percentage.
Okay, so this is a good direction for the trend. So
I should say I have never seen Marcus happier than this. I see a smile on Marcus's face now.
Well, I mean, I just want the trustees to understand that the district, we have really not been able to build up a designation. I mean, this does provide a cushion for us for as unforeseen things come up, with reopening and other priorities. So this does allow a cushion, and he's right. I am very happy that we have that cushion, and even for declining enrollment. I mean, it provides a cushion for all of those unforeseen things that we can now earmark funds to help support our budget without having to make any adjustments. So it's good.
My question is, see, we see a better trend. Do we actually want to talk about maybe in the future, we want to raise the reserve percentage so that we won't have those kind of a crisis and,
I mean, I think that we would definitely, as staff, would, if the board brings that, we would definitely respond to that if that is a joint um, uh, initiative of the board to do that. So,
I would like to do that sometime, after I understand better about those thick books. And another thing is, remember from last time's meeting, and other school district have a reserve of 17%, right? And
it's
so,
it's just, and I will say this, trustees, I think it's very hard, when you're in a declining spiral like we are in terms of enrollment.
Mhm,
It's very difficult to be able to increase reserves and cut your budget at the same time.
mhm,
So, that's why we're utilizing the designations as we are getting some of these CARES Act dollars and other dollars, and being able to not put those dollars into our reserve, because we could have easily just boosted up our reserve. We could have taken those dollars, but we are, by designating the dollars, it sort of is a reserve
mhm.
that we can utilize. Um, but it's
Right.
just,
So
go ahead.
I suppose these are additional dollars we are getting, and we cannot skimp on any of the safety measures for sure, right? But, but eventually, any money left over would add to the reserve. And
Right. And
personally, I
currently,
would like to see this
okay.
number to be at 6%, so that we are not having to fight on a regular basis, and we have some cushion.
Well, I think you're gonna be in a fight to get it to 6%, but I'm sorry, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that, but I think right now the board does have a goal of 3.5%. The 2% is our state mandated, plus an additional 1%, and then there's a goal for an additional 0.5%. So we have, at this point, we are meeting the board's mandated, well, the goal of a minimum of 3.5%.
Okay, I mean, we can have a more detailed discussion in the board meeting, but this is definitely good trend, and I suppose the public should be happy, and all the stakeholders should be happy.
But also another question I'm trying to see. Remember, we put all this money we give to the Alameda County, and they would invest, by a fund manager, and the return is like 2%. Remember, we saw these things before, and my question is, can we save something ourselves and give to somebody else to invest? We don't have to give all our reserve to. Can we do that? No.
No, we have to, all of our money, unless Robbie, you can correct me, but all of our money needs to go through the county, through LAIF, through the treasury. I mean, we
Yeah, I mean, these are not long-term investments, right? So we need it to be as liquid as possible.
Did you have a comment, Robbie?
The risk is also something that needs to be managed.
You are correct,
It's a very
Marcus.
good point, yeah, Yaji.
Yeah, because these are government, these funds are government, operating funds, we have to really, the California, the government, they want to make sure that we are putting them in places where we're not putting them at risk. So that's why we have to utilize the county treasury. And Robbie, go ahead.
Marcus. So there's a very strict regulations on where we can invest our money. In the past, we usually districts invest it with the county treasurer, and sometimes we districts are allowed to invest it with LAIF. I forgot what LAIF stands for. However, because the interest of LAIF and county controller is much higher than LAIF. Sometimes it would be the LAIF is higher, but at this time for the past, I think 3 or 4 years, county controllers is exceeding the rate of for interest.
Can I add something here, Marcus and CJ, if you allow me? I just want to make a distinction that when we invest money, that's actual cash, which is different than the fund that we have. The fund balance is different than cash. Cash is the actual cash that we have in the bank account, and we get a return on that cash.
Hmm.
Fund balance does not necessarily mean that is cash.
Oh, so what
And
does that mean?
just going back to
Oh, fund balance.
what does it mean that
Mhm.
fund balance means that the government promises to give us money, but we don't get all that cash
Oh,
in
got it.
one installment.
Got it. Okay.
But we show that in our fund balance as 100% fund balance as revenue. That's the accounting. And going back to another issue about reserve, about 4 years ago, although Robbie is a historian of the district, but I would just mention that about 4 years ago, we used to have 4% reserve mandate, 2% state requirement, and Board of Education had a requirement of 2%. So we used to have 4%. But 4 years ago, when we had budget reductions, at that point, our requirement went down from 2% to 1%. It means that now we maintain 3% as compared to 4% that we have until 4 years ago.
Wow. We should go back.
Yeah, and 6% is not that far away, right? We have to be optimists. Sorry,
Okay.
let's move on then. Anything from you, Zhang?
I'm fine. I guess that's all my question. Oh, one thing about this fence thing. Shall we move to 1.15.3?
I was asking Zion for anything on
Oh.
15.2.
I had a question on the unrealized savings or that's shown on slide 13. So that totals about like 6.4 million. And I'm wondering where is that like addressed, or is that factored into the budget cut decisions that we made a couple weeks ago?
Where is it?
This is on slide 13 of the presentation that's attached.
Are you talking about the budget presentation, Zion, or
Yeah,
Mhm.
the second interim budget presentation.
Mm-hmm.
slide 13?
Slide 13, if it is an update, if it's is an update, it says second interim reductions adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just that's the decisions that the board made last spring. And we're basically just showing an update of whether or not the reductions held or not. And this is actually the last report of those reductions.
Yeah, so of the reductions that was made last year, 6.4 of them didn't actually end up happening because of COVID implications and all that, right?
Right.
So I'm wondering, like, is that reflected in this year's budget, or where did we account for
Yeah,
that?
that's all reflected. Absolutely. When we update the budget and we have to project our budget at this point in time, it does take into account a change in the projection of revenues that reductions that we were expecting. So yes, included in the analysis.
Okay, then if there are no questions, let's move on to the next one. I think you had a question on fencing. You're on mute.
And I think this is Kelly, this is a non-budget, this has no budget implication?
No, there's no budget implications.
Right, no budget, but that means that we must make a decision on those based on make a decision on your recommendation, right, Kelly?
Yes.
Yes, you
So-
must make a decision.
Right, so that means I think I think I'm gonna drive by those schools and then with this presentation to see whether they look good or not, you know?
I think that's a great idea.
Because otherwise, how do we know, right? I would do that.
Well, I have some very nice renderings for you to look at as well, so you can get
But
some.
how do I do that? Can I see it in
It is
person?
actually in the presentation that was attached to the item, so you're
Uh-huh.
welcome to look at it and see the actual products. And then if you'd like to go by each one of the schools, I think that would be helpful too.
I think I would do that because with all, I mean, those, even though there's no dollar attached to that, but which is already buried in each project, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's worth it because when you put something on, it's gonna last for, I don't know, 30 years, 50 years. It better look good, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the goals is, and I want you guys to understand, is we're just trying to make sure that we standardize the products that we use across the district. So the information I've provided for you is for it to be used across the district at all the schools on a case-by-case basis. So you're not going to go to one school and they'll have, something that's a different height or a different material. It'll be one of those items that you're going to be reviewing in the proper application of where it's supposed to be put.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, then let's see. The next one is the CPA report. This is measure E, right?
So this is our annual report that we submit to the board of our annual financial audit that is done. This covers our academic year of 1920. So it is just the auditor's report that states that we had a clean audit. We had no exceptions taken, which is very good. And it just confirms that all of the dollars that we have allocated for Measure E are being spent appropriately and for the items that they are required to be spent for.
Okay, good. Then we don't need to review that here. We can discuss in the main meeting. The next one, Orion Security, we have discussed this a few times as it has just moved from board meeting to board meeting. Any question on this?
I don't have any.
Okay, then the next one. This is Sunshine proposal, so that's not a budget item.
Yeah, I think that's it regarding budget.
Yeah, so the next one regarding budget. Now 15.8, this is the standardized testing. I mean, if the board decides to not do this, does it save us some money?
To clarify that question, Trustee Prasad, are you saying if we decide not to test?
Yes.
Well, I think that this resolution is really a statement that that we don't think testing is the best sequence of events for our students right now, given the pandemic and distance learning, and that perhaps there may be another more appropriate window for standardized testing for our students. So in that sense, it wouldn't really be a significant cost implication for us. The testing that takes place, those testing materials are really an expense of the state. I would say that I think the state could spend their money elsewhere, but this wouldn't necessarily be a direct implication to our funding model.
Okay, sounds good. And we can debate the merit of the resolution in the board meeting. The next one, there's no budget implication for the supplemental instructional materials either. So,
No, not from the policy in and of itself.
Okay. Now the solar pilot program. Does this have a budget implication for the action that you're looking for?
Yes, it does. I need for you all to direct me on what fund that we would actually pay for the pilot program in.
Okay. And how much are you asking for?
I hold on one second. Let me pull this up. I apologize for not having it handy. But I think we are capped at about $5 million with the different options that I have presented. We're looking at a cost savings if we implement of about $5.8 million. And so that I would be looking for us to be given the authority for us to at least solicit a proposal to go up to that limit if that is what we, get back in bids from people to actually do the implementation. So yes, I would be asking for what fund that we could take that from.
But Kelly, some of these options though that you're providing the board have no cost. You have a zero cost option.
No, but maybe I misunderstood the question because he was asking if there was a cost impact. And so if we choose to go ahead and are allowed to implement, the implementation, the overall budget that I would be expecting is that we would expect about $5 million would need to be spent for us to achieve the installation of all of the solar panels. But please correct me if I misunderstood the question wrong.
No, I got the answer to my question. Okay. So here you're looking at a 20-year savings, and the break-even period, is that defined somewhere as well?
The break-even period is after year 5, and that is a supplemental attachment I can provide. I did not provide that in the presentation.
Okay.
But we are going to have Ben LeBoy with Will Dan, who's our solar consultant, and he will be able to address any very specific technical questions that you guys would have on this.
Okay, sounds good.
Mhm.
Then let's see, move on. We are already at 6 o'clock. The next one is a declaration, not a budget item. Or is there, what does this declaration, the need for fully qualified educators? So this is, I think CJ, you were explaining this is something that we have to do to meet the state mandates and hire teachers with some accelerated credentials and then have them fulfill their credential requirements over time.
Correct. There wouldn't be a budget implication for this, but this is a mandated requirement from the state. Our state provides credentials through the California Teacher Commission on Credentialing. And in that process, there are individuals who earn their preliminary credentials, then they earn their clear credentials. And oftentimes we have individuals who may need an emergency credential. And in order for a school district to employ a candidate on an emergency credential, which is something you need to request through your county office and then through the CTC, you need to have this designation for fully qualified educators completed each year. And this is a standard practice for all school districts. And the declaration itself reflects projections of the district of what our needs may be. And it provides us that flexibility to hire someone if we need to on an emergency credential.
Okay, sounds good. So I suppose that's all of the budget items here. So anything else from anyone before we close? No? Then we can adjourn the meeting at 6:02. Thank you, everyone.
See you guys on Wednesday.
Yep, see you there.